Good evening to one and all present over here, and a very good evening to Purvish Malkan sir. Respected friends, yesterday we had a session with AOR Abhinav Srivastava sir on the jurisprudence of PIL, in which he shared light upon the cases ranging from Husnara Khatun case to the recent cases. He also talked about the jurisprudence of PIL and also talked about which type of cases are dealt and which are rejected by the court time and again. All these things were discussed by Abhinav sir. And today, fortunately, we have Purvish Malkan sir with us, who is going to talk about the other aspect of PIL, that is preparation and drafting. First of all, I would like to thank Purvish Malkan sir for joining this platform of Philomath. Sir, we are indebted to you for giving your time to our students, sir. This is to inform you, sir, that we have students from all around the country, right from Bangalore, Delhi, Punjab, from different states, from different law colleges. These students are doing their law course from and ranging from different years, first year, second year, third year. So we have a mix of different years and different law college students. So, sir, thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule to us. So, without taking more time of Purvish sir, I would request Purvish Malkan sir to kindly start with today's sessions. Sir, if we have your permission, then please.
Yes, I'm hopeful that I am audible to you people.
Yes, sir.
Very well, thank you. So today, in fact, I had very limited scope on the discussion on PIL, and that limited scope is to the extent of drafting of an PIL. Now, before we actually proceed on the aspect as to how we can draft the public interest litigation, we must understand first the importance of drafting. Drafting not of a PIL, but we as an advocate will be, or the future advocate as you people will be, thinking of a drafting of the pleading as a whole. I am not sure as to how many of you had actually came across to the provisions of Code of Civil Procedure, which requires that in pleading, what is essential is to narrate the facts. You are also required to narrate the cause of action and the jurisdiction of the court. So please note down certain aspects which are relevant. And I may tell you from the slides which you will be seeing, that is only for the guiding purpose. I won't be reading any of the words written in this slide. So whatever I speak, you may have to note it down. This slides before you is only for the guiding purpose of the entire lecture and nothing further than that. So please, everyone, have your pen and notebook ready with you so that the entire picture that I'm going to put before you, you may draw it in your own manner. So the pleadings required under the Code of Civil Procedure first is what is the nature of the case that you are filing. So that first is would be the nature of case that you are filing before the court. Then comes upon the parties between whom disputes exist or issue arises. So first is the nature of the petition or the or the or the or the suit or the plaint that you are preferring before the court. Don't consider this lecture to be a lecture on drafting. I am just giving an outline of drafting so that I can, after actually giving you the outline of drafting, can go on to the specifications of drafting of the public interest litigation. So please do not consider or construe this lecture to be on the drafting, pleading and conveyancing. No, nothing. I'm not going to give you the details of the drafting of the pleadings as a whole. But to the extent required, I need to tell you what are the essentials of drafting, and that essentials would be the one which you are required to note. So first thing is you need to mention the nature of the case that you are filing. So first, from the reading itself, the court will understand. The first line itself, the court will understand before whom the pleading is filed. What is the nature of your issue? Second is you need to mention the parties with whom the disputes or the claims that you are claiming are required to be mentioned under the cause title of the pleading. So second aspect would be the parties, the required relevant parties against whom the reliefs are claimed. Whatever relief that you are will be claiming, or whatever issues that you are trying to get adjudicated or resolved, such issues will be adjudicated against someone. That parties who are essential for the purpose of adjudicating these issues will be the necessary parties, and they are required to be mentioned immediately after mentioning the nature of the case that you are filing. Then starts your actual, after this formation of the cause title, then starts what is, we call it as the drafting or pleading of the plaint, suit, or a petition, whatever name we give it as, or a complaint, wherein in general, now please note it down for your life. In general, if you follow this principle, you will be a successful drafter, and a successful drafter will always be a successful advocate in their career. So follow these instructions, which I used to follow throughout my career as an advocate for last 20 years. And I follow this outline throughout my drafting of all the petitions, complaint rates, plaint, written statements, this counter statements or counter claims, whatever the nature of the pleadings is, or SLPs. This would be the actual outline that I draft my petitions upon. In para 1, always do not forget this for your life. And I may tell you, out of 100 draft you see, you will never find this first paragraph in 90% of the draft. The first paragraph which is now I'm going to mention, you won't find the place in the 90% of draft that you will be looking throughout your career. And that is why I'm telling you, please note it down and please keep this first paragraph with you for your life. Wherever it is required to be drafted, this first paragraph which I'm now telling you, which I'm going to tell you, must be always find place as para 1. And that would be your gist of the issue, or summarization of your issue, or your issue must be explained in a very brief manner in the very first paragraph. You are not required to mention any other aspect in the first paragraph other than what your issue is, what you are before, what you are claiming before the court, nothing further than that. So for example, now let us take an example. Supposedly a hutman dwellers staying besides or a road, or below some, or below some flyover, or in a barren area of a city, and they are residing for about 20-25 years on that area now. And one day municipal corporation decides to actually remove them from that place, and they want to develop that area into a beautiful garden by removing that hutman dwellers from the area, because that slum which has been created because of that hutman dwellers is actually reducing the cost of the nearby vicinity. The builders of that area are smart enough to get into well with the municipal officers to get this encroachment of so-called encroachment of the hutman dwellers removed. who are staying peacefully for 90 years, but they are encroachers. They do not own that land. That land belongs to municipal corporation. But we have in the Oliga Tellis judgment that right to shelter is also a fundamental right, which has been subsequently been uh, 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 taken which has been subsequently diluted or reduced to a certain extent by the Supreme Court. Be that as it may, we are not on the issues of what Supreme Court did on the Oliga Tellis issue. Our main concern is on the facts of the drafting. Therefore, the hutman dwellers now they cannot approach the court directly. They do not have the sufficient sources to approach the court directly. And some public spirited individual thought it fit that in place of this hutman dwellers, he will file petition before the High Court in order to obtain stay of the proceedings, of the demolitions, which is going to take place against the hutman dwellers. And that public spirited individual approaches you as an advocate. So now let us take this case would be as one of the example for the purpose of drafting. So he approaches you for filing of a public interest litigation in order to save the demolition of the hutman dwellers. But then your first question would be, sir, they are the encroachers. They are staying illegally on that land for 20 years. How can they claim a right over it? That's one. Secondly, the corporation required the land for the purpose of a garden, which is also a public purpose. That will be beneficial to the public of the nearby vicinity to for their development, for their health, for the growth of the trees, for the environment and whatnot. But again, the development of garden is also necessary. So there are two conflicting parameters that you are faced with, that how could the PIL be filed in favor of the hutman dwellers who actually do not own the land and who are the encroachers over the land. But then you have the support of Oliga Tellis, which says that right to shelter. And therefore, now what is to be done? What would be the balancing line between these two issues? And the balancing line would be, as far as now law is concerned for that, is that the slum dwellers, if at all are to be removed, or if are removed, who are under illegal encroachment and staying in an area for a substantial period of time, and in that circumstances, the government, the state, are required to provide them an alternative accommodations. Now, what are these alternative accommodations? You have in each of your states slum clearance board who actually construct houses for the slum dwellers, maybe of smaller houses of one room kitchen or say one room only. Small houses are being constructed by the boards of the slum clearances in the area wherever they have the right to construct that, or the slum clearance board have been allotted the land by the state government to construct such type of houses. Then that houses are being constructed, and these people can be accommodated in the houses which have been constructed for that purpose. So your prayer could be you can pray before the honorable court as an advocate that let them be removed, but they can only be removed only if they have been provided alternative adequate accommodation. Now there is a term which we have used, is an alternative adequate accommodation. What does it mean? It means that the alternative accommodation is that any accommodation other than this. So there is no problem with that. Any other accommodation in an alteration of this accommodation which is sought to be demolished, that may be provided. So there is no problem. But what about adequacy? Adequacy. Now, issue arises here, and mostly this issue are always arisen in such type of cases. Whenever such demolition usually took place, you people are from various parts of the country. You may be aware, you must have seen some small slum dwellers in your area. But whenever they are removed, they are actually been thrown out, or the alternative accommodations which are being provided to them will be found around 15-20 kilometers away from the city limits. So if they must have occupied, or the slum dwellers board might have land 15 kilometers away from the city area, and then they have been provided accommodation there where there is no water facility, no drainage facility, and most important is for the slum dwellers is that they must get daily wages. Now, 15 kilometers away from the city, they won't be able to earn their livelihood from that place. They are staying in slum because they are daily wages. They earn their bread and butter. Not, they don't eat butter, so don't speak butter. They earn their bread and onion from the area which they are staying. They used to work as a maids in the houses, or as a laborer in the nearby factories, or as a worker with some industries, whatever the case may be. But they actually survive from the nearby vicinity where they get sufficient occupation. If they are thrown away 15 kilometers away from the city limits, then they won't be able to get any occupation for their livelihood, and therefore that accommodation cannot be said to be an adequate accommodation. You got my point. So that's where the question of adequacy will arise when the alternative accommodations are provided. But be that as it may, we are not concerned with the actual facts. Now come down to drafting purpose. So now your first paragraph what would be your first paragraph? Your first paragraph then would read as: the petition is preferred to challenge, the public interest litigation has been preferred to challenge demolition of hutman dwellers of such and such area by the respondent corporation without providing them alternative adequate accommodation. Full stop. So this would be your first paragraph, which will explain in gist the entire issue that court is required to look upon in the petition. Got my point? So first, from reading of these 4 lines, the court will understand promptly as to what is the issue that you are agitating before the court in the petition. That would be your first paragraph. Nothing further than that. If you have something further, then you may say 1A, 1B, 1C. But your first paragraph must conclude with what is your issue and what you are praying for before the honorable court. It must come in gist in that paragraph. Second, now comes the para 2. Now this would be for all your drafting for your life. Now supposedly you have been drafting a writ petition. Supposedly you are drafting a writ petition challenging a notification whereby individual's pension has been suspended. Supposedly, I'm just taking an example in a gist to explain this. You are challenging a notification whereby individuals, that is petitioners, who will be the petitioner's pension, the pension that he is claiming, has been suspended by the appropriate respondent, whoever has suspended that. And then you are to challenge on the ground that such suspension has been suspended without providing you the opportunity of hearing. Also, on contrary to the notifications or the laws prevailing under the service rules, etc., etc. So this would be the area. Now, what would be your first paragraph in that case? Take an example. So in that case, you will be saying that the petitioner has preferred present petition under Article 226 of the Constitution with a view to challenge the suspension of pension of the petitioner by the respondent so and so by notification or the circular dated such and such, which is in contravention to the such and such provision of the service law, and also the impugned notification has been passed without providing you the opportunity of hearing, full stop. So this 4 or 5 lines will describe the very nature of the petition which you are preferring. If you do this, if you follow this, then your draft would be the best draft for the court to understand the issue. The reason behind this is that the courts are so overburdened that they do not have sufficient time to go through the entire draft to understand the issue. So it is our duty as a good drafter to provide them in the minimum words as possible the entire issue to them in the beginning itself, so that they may not require to read the entire petition at all. However, they may read for the purpose of understanding what is the nature of the notification and what are the provisions under which you are challenging the notification. So that's all about your first paragraph in all the types of drafting. Now we will go to the niceties of the PIL letter stage. Now come down to your second paragraph. Second paragraph would be, now note this down. First paragraph would be your introduction or the summary of the petition. Second paragraph would be your facts on which you are preferring the petition. Note this down. Second paragraph would be the facts only and nothing further. Now, the rule of the pleading, as you know, it says that there must be facts and facts only, and no law is required to be pleaded. And we will follow this for life, and we will follow this for all purposes. And I do follow that. I do not mention the law in the pleadings till now, till date. And that is actually helping me out in for the purpose of, thinking on the field when I am before the court, so that's where it helps. But now, therefore, we follow the rules as mentioned in the CPC. Now, after the facts, now you in para 2, there will be your entire facts, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2C, 2D, date wise, you will be mentioning all the facts of your case. So that's how your facts will be there in the paragraph 2, date wise, till the notification that you are challenging, or the circular that you are challenging, or the order that you are challenging. So till that, your facts will be there. Thereafter, you need to go to the grounds on which you are preferring the petition. Now, whenever you are drafting the suit or a plaint, you may not require to mention the grounds of filing of a suit or a plaint, as that will merge with the facts itself. But we actually does mention grounds on which we are challenging or preferring the petition before the honorable court in the writ petitions. So when we are in writ petition, the third paragraph will be your grounds, and the grounds would be not to mention law, but taking shelter of the law, you will be mentioning the grounds. So supposedly a circular has been issued in contravention to section 4 of a particular act, then you are not required to mention section 4, but you can only say, because fact you can mention in the grounds, therefore you can say that your circular is in contravention to section 4 of such and such act. But that is not mentioning of a law. You are mentioning a fact, saying that this is in violation of this. That is fact for us. That remains fact for us. And you are only mentioning the fact in the ground. Now, suppose there is a demolition, then demolition, there is for the purpose of demolition, there is a government notification or a government resolution, state government resolution, which says that if any person occupies the land or are on the land of a slum dweller for more than 15 years, then it would be the policy of the state government to provide them alternative accommodation. Now, there is a GR existing, and municipal corporation has taken a recourse to demolish them without following the GR government resolution. Without following the GR, the municipal corporation taken recourse to demolish the hutman dwellers. Then in that case, you can definitely mention that this is in violation. The demolition is in violation to the government resolution dated such and such, passed by the such and such government or such and such branch of the government, with the details thereof. But that will not imply that you are mentioning the law. You are only mentioning the facts that it is in contravention to the circular. So that's how you will follow the grounds. Grounds will be of all the nature. It could be, you can say that that the government the demolition is being done without giving a notice to you. That notice, non-giving of notice is also one of the ground. After giving a notice of demolition, non providing an opportunity of hearing is also could be one of the ground. After providing an opportunity, not passing a detailed reason order, it could be one of the ground to challenge that. After giving a reason order, not including certain aspects that you have represented before the municipal corporation within the ambit of that order, could also be one of the grounds. So then you need to see, you need to read the order and check out the nature of the order under which you can challenge the action of the corporation of demolition. So that's how you will be following the grounds. After grounds, in the writ petitions, you have certain formal paragraphs, and that formal paragraphs and that is where you need to declare, you need to make some declarations in writ petition. So we are talking about this pleadings in general. So your fourth paragraph is after grounds, your fourth paragraph would be declaration. So declaration is that you have not preferred any other petition in any other court of identical nature. So that would be the declaration. You need to declare to the court that you have not approached parallelly to any other court with the same issue other than the present petition. Now, supposedly, for demolition, you have also a recourse to go to approach civil court as a representative suit against for the purpose of benefiting the hutman dwellers. Then it is possible that you have approached the civil court, and civil court has, from ex facie or prima facie reading, has dismissed your suit as not maintainable. You have dismissed that. Then you had already took recourse against the action which you are challenging in some other forum. Then you need to require to mention that in your writ petition, saying that the suit preferred by you, representative suit preferred by you before the civil court, has been dismissed as not maintainable by that court. But without disclosure thereof, you cannot prefer the present petition. So it is presumed generally that if you have not disclosed that you have approached any other forum for the alternative relief, then in such circumstances, you have not done that. That is the presumption. So in order to have that presumption, there is a set declaration in the writ petitions throughout the country, which we follow, and we declare that we have not preferred any other petition of an identical nature in any other court of the very same nature as what you are praying in this court. So that's where the declaration comes in. And again, in some of the courts, we have a set paragraph. What I usually do is that I do not close my petition. I do not close my petition with what I have drafted at the initial stage. I always seek an liberty of the Honorable Court to alter or amend my writ petition in future if it is so required. So you add one more paragraph in your writ petition saying that you seek you seek a liberty of the Honorable Court to alter, add or amend the writ petition in the future if so advised and required for the purpose of adjudication. So that's how we actually add that paragraph as well in the draft. And then we follow with the prayer. And prayer is the actual heart of the entire petition, and where you claim what you want. And that prayer must be so specific, so precise, so unambiguous that court can, if at all favors you, would be able to grant that relief in your favor. The prayers could be of such nature that even if court wants, the prayer has been drafted in such a manner that relief could not be granted. So for example, for our hutman dweller petition, we will say that be pleased to, your lordships may be pleased to, by issuance of writ of mandamus. We will be claiming mandamus, whenever the order of demolition is to be set aside. We will be claiming mandamus against that order, because that will be the action on the part of government which is mandating you to remove yourself from the premises where you are staying. So we'll be claiming mandamus against that action, and for that purpose we actually pray to the Honorable Court that the court may be pleased to issue a writ of mandamus or any other writ, order or direction, any other appropriate writ, order or direction, quashing and setting aside. Now we need to quash that. We need to set aside the order. So what we will say, direction, quashing and setting aside the order of demolition passed by the municipal corporation dated such and such, which is at annexure such and such. So this would be your specific prayer. In alternative, you may also say that by writ of mandamus or any other appropriate writ, order or direction, the corporation may be directed to provide alternative adequate accommodation. Full stop. So that would be the second prayer. Could be the second prayer. So these are the two things which we may pray. So this is the actual outline of the draft. Now let us see what is, now let us come down to the public interest litigation. Now what manner, what sort of draft can we prefer public interest litigation? Now there is no such actual rule, I may tell you, which requires a specific manner in which a public interest litigation could be invoked. However, now, if a formal public interest litigation is filed through advocate by some petitioner, then certain formats are prescribed by the rules under the court in which a PIL is to be preferred. Now we will see one of the format or the rules of, let's say, Delhi High Court in the slide now. But before I go to this slide, I may say, I will not actually, go into the introduction part, because you people have actually I've been told that yesterday was the day when you have actually learned about the public interest litigation. So I will not go into the background and everything, but will come down directly to the filing of a PIL, right? So PIL, as you know, does not require any formal, as I said, does not require any formal manner in which it is to be done. But if it is to be preferred by the advocate, through some petitioner, then courts have provided certain formats. The PIL can also be instituted by the court itself by taking suo motu action upon the facts known to the public at large, the facts of which a judicial notice could be taken by the court. Now, supposedly, for example, in the present pandemic, during the present pandemic condition, the Supreme Court actually took suo motu the action on the Union of India as a whole for vaccinating the citizens of the country, and also for providing the oxygens which was in scarcity during the peak of the pandemic, and pass directions to the governments in order to provide oxygens to the states. That action was not done at the behest of any petitioner, but the court itself, by taking judicial note of the fact which was available at the public domain, took up that issue suo motu and took action and took appropriate remedial action against the union government and the state governments for providing for protecting the rights of the individuals in getting vaccination, and also in getting proper medical equipments like oxygen and medicines, whatever were required. So that's one of the example of how court can take the public interest litigation to itself. So that's how anyone may put a fact on the public domain. Now we all are equipped with the social media, and everyone can have his own channel or a news channel. Each one of you could have your own news channel or a channel by which you can agitate, or you can highlight a specific issue around your area on that social media platform, and that is the public domain. That is where you are putting the facts on the public domain, which the court or even a judge, any judge of the High Court or the Supreme Court can take suo motu action from the information that you have put on the social media. He may individually verify that facts and then may take the recourses of suo motu action, or after taking recourse of the suo motu action, the judge may take suo motu. So that's how the action of suo motu could be taken. The another recourse is a letter to the honorable the judges of the High Courts, or the Chief Justice of the High Court, or honorable the judges of the Supreme Court, or the Chief Justice of India. So you may write a letter informing them certain facts which, according to you, is violating the fundamental rights of the individual or a group of individual or of a society as a whole, or there are certain issues which you may require to highlight, which the government is not taking action in order to either prevent them or compelling government to act in a certain manner. Either they need to prevent them or to compel them to act in a particular manner. Now, supposedly, a mining activity is going on in the forest area. Suppose this is just an example which I am giving you to make you understand the facts. So supposedly a mining activity is going on in the forest area, and the persons who are conducting that mining activity are high-handed people of that vicinity. No one could dare. They are the bung of that vicinity, and no one could dare to speak against them. But a public-spirited boy of that area, who is again furious of the people who are doing mining activity, does write a letter I'm sorry, to the Chief Justice of the state, informing him about the illegal mining activity being conducted by a particular individual in a particular area of the forest. And because it being a forest, it is not very well known to the forest officers or the mining authorities, or even if they are aware of, they are not taking any action against them. So you are compelling, you want that the authorities, the mining authorities, the forest authorities, you want to compel them to take action, restrictive action against that individual who is doing illegal mining. And thereby you write to the honorable the Chief Justice, and Chief Justice took that action suo moto by itself upon your letter. Then that will be termed as a PIL, and then a recourse of that PIL could be taken by the court. Court may appoint an amicus in the favor of the person who has written the letter to the honorable the Chief Justice. So that's the another way of taking up the public interest litigation. And the third way or third mode is the formal mode by which the petition uh, in the nature of a writ petition, because PIL is again finally a writ petition, nothing further than that. Petition in the nature of a writ petition is being filed by taking in help of the advocate, or some public spirited individual may also file PIL as in person before the court. Now, for that purpose, before we go to the actual filing, we must understand, and I am sure you are aware of, but just to give you the outline under which the PIL is being filed. The PIL is filed before the High Court under Article 226 of the Constitution, and before the Supreme Court under Article 32 of the Constitution. Now, High Court 226 power is a very wide power than what Supreme Court power is under Article 32. Supreme Court has very limited power under Article 32, and that too and only to an extent of protection of fundamental right and nothing else. 32 is limited to the protection of fundamental rights and nothing else. That cannot be invoked for any other purpose. Whereas High Court discretionary power under Article 226 could be invoked for any other purpose than fundamental right. Note this down. So scope of Article 226 is much, much wider than what 32 is. The difference between 32 and 226, there is another difference between 32 and 226 is the placement of the articles. Article 32, as you all know, is forming part of part 3 of the Constitution, whereas 226 you will find under the state judiciary, under the part dealing with the state judiciary, that is High Court. So these are the two different placements. The 32 is not under the union is not falling under the part dealing with union judiciary. It is forming a part where fundamental rights are mentioned, whereas union or the Supreme Court is dealing in a separate part, which is starting from Article 112, 113, 15, 16, 36, etc., etc., 136, etc. So we are not concerned with that. Article 32 has its own placement under fundamental rights. 226 has a placement with the powers of the with the placement where High Court is mentioned. Now, difference of these two is, in very nutshell, is that 32 is itself recognized as a fundamental right, whereas Article 226 is a discretionary power of the High Court. The High Court has a discretion whether to exercise its power for the facts and issue placed before it or otherwise. So these are the two differences. Now, let us go to the formal drafting. You all know, even in fact, the concepts of public interest litigation, just to give you how it was been done in our mythological time as well. You all might have heard about the bell being put outside the uh, fort of the king, where any litigant, anyone who is who has suffered something wrong may uh, may bell his issue. That's what we call bell and issue. Bell and issue means you need to bell the issue, uh, and you need to bang that bell to inform the administrator of the fort that you have an issue, and then you will be placed before the king, his majesty or her majesty, I mean his majesty the king, where you will be placing your grievance. So, and that grievance may be an individual grievance or a grievance of a society as a whole. But that concept of placing grievance before the majesties is prevailing in our country for very long. And article 226 and 32 are that prerogative power which the majesties were having, which the king were having at that stage. That is these are the same power which we have given to the judiciary under article 226 and 32. This prerogative power is the power which can call upon anyone, any person at the discretion of the judiciary to answer the list being placed before it. It is not required that that issue would be fall within its jurisdiction apart from the territorial wise. So that's where this prerogative writ is all about. It can question anyone and everyone under the roof, to under the state roof, to act in a particular manner. And that prerogative power is again divided into 5 parts, as we all know: mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, habeas corpus, and quo warranto. So that's all you all know about it. So this 5 natures of PIL, or 5 natures of writ could be issued, and you may claim any of this writ for the purpose of the public interest litigation that you are willing to seek. Now, as I said, the PIL can be filed in 2 ways. That is, one is by a letter, or another is the formal way, which we are talking about. That is the drafting of the PIL. Now, drafting, what I have given you is the general idea as to how a draft should be, and it could be a draft for anything. It could be for the PIL, could be for the writ, could be for the plaint, etc., etc. Now, just see on your screen now, from on the second part, what you see is the Delhi High Court rules 2010, which required certain things for the purpose of PIL, which has been drafted, which has been filed formally. Now look to that, please. Now what does it require? It says that now this we will compare. Now please mind, this we will compare with the outline that I had already given to you for the purpose of draft. Now see this. It says that the PIL must contain an inspiration immediately below the number of the writ petition in the title, namely the matter of public interest litigation. So that's what I said. Number 1, if you can remember, I have said the nature of the petition that you are filing. So this is the nature of the petition. Nature of the petition is the public interest litigation, right? So you need to mention that precisely at the beginning, at the title, after where the number is given. Just mention that this is the matter of public interest litigation. You just mention that, so that the person or the judge who will be reading this will understand from the very first line itself that this is the PIL. This is not for the purpose of the petitioner who is filing this. Now, after that, what we have learned is we need to mention the cause title, that is parties to the PIL, and parties could be the person against whom you are seeking the relief. Against it could be even an individual therein wherein the relief is being sought. Now supposedly a mining case that we have taken up. Now supposedly we file a formal petition before the High Court. We are to file a formal petition before the High Court. Then who will be your respondents there? Your respondents would be, the first will be the Forest Department, the concerned collector of the area, the Forest Department of that area, the Forest Ministry, then Mining Department of that area, Mining Ministry, and the respondent would be the person who is actually mining. So that person will also be the respondent here. He need to answer as to whether he is illegally mining or otherwise. He must be given an opportunity to explain as to under what authority he is conducting that mining, and therefore it is required that the notice be also be issued to the person who is mining, who is doing mining activity, and therefore he is also required to be joined as a party respondent. Now after this, what you have is your in your first paragraph. See, now there is a difference in the first paragraph. Now you see the B, part B, last paragraph of this page, which is in front of you. It says a specific averment in para 1. Now this is going beyond our concept that I have taught to you. You remember that? Remember that I have what should be your first paragraph? It should be the gist of the issue involved. But now what the court is asking us to do, a specific averment in para 1 of the writ petition to the effect that writ petitioner has no personal interest in the litigation. So there has to be a declaration in a PIL, which court requires now, that you as a petitioner do not have any personal interest in the petition. It is for the public at large. But sometimes, supposedly, as I have given an example, that a boy of a village where mining activity is taking place, he is also having his personal interest, because he will also be benefited if that mining is stopped, isn't it? Apart from it being a public interest, he is also having a personal interest. Suppose because he is living in the same area where the mining action is taken place, and it will also save his own land or surrounding land if mining is stopped. So it will benefit him as well. So here the modification would be to this extent, and we will read it again now. A specific government in para 1 of the writ petition to the effect that the writ petitioner has no personal interest. We will not say that now. We will say that writ petitioner who is also a resident of same village may also get benefited out of the issue which is being agitated before this honorable court. But the issue is also in the nature of a public at large, and therefore present petition is preferred as a public interest litigation. So there has to be a disclosure to that effect if the petitioner has his own interest, or even a remote interest. It is not a direct interest that individual is having, but even if a remote interest that individual might have, it is required to be mentioned in that very paragraph. Now, but this paragraph is going beyond our concept which I have taught you earlier. How will you actually balance that? The balancing would be that, again, follow the rule. The rule is first paragraph must be your gist. So you will mention the gist. What you will be saying in the first paragraph. You say that present petition is for the purpose of challenging the illegal mining activity conducted by such and such person, and non-action on the part of the respondent in taking any remedial action for restraining that individual from staying that mining activity. So this would be your gist of the first paragraph, and then make 1B. So this, and then mention this, that though the petitioner is the resident of same village, he is remotely benefited of the stoppage of illegal mining activity. But since the entire issue is of the public interest, the present public interest litigation has been preferred to the limited benefit of the petitioner. So in paragraph 1, as it is required here in front of you, that in para 1 it is required to be mentioned. You do mention in para 1, but after the gist that you are required to write. So your first thing will be your gist. Second would be this. Second would be mentioning of the declaration that either you have personal benefit, either you do not have any personal benefit. Then comes in para 2, and it is required that specific averment in the writ petition as to the source of knowledge of facts alleged in the writ petition and further inquiries, investigation made to determine the veracity of the same. Now you see this. This will always be in tantrum with what I have said for your para 2. As I said in para 2, it should be your facts. Now that is what is required here. It says that a specific averment in para 2 of the writ petition as to the source of knowledge. So whenever you are narrating a fact in para 2, you are always going to disclose the source from where you have collected the information. And that is what you will be mentioning here. And you will also mention as to what inquiries that you have individually conducted and what further investigation is required to be carried out for the purpose of determining the same. So that's what our para 2. Now you see, that's what it says. Now it says a specific averment in para 3 after narration of fact. Now what does it require? A specific averment in para 3 of writ petition specifying the class of person whose benefit the petition has been filed and as to how persons are incapable of accessing the court. So if supposedly for the purpose of hutment dwellers, a petition is filed, then you need to mention that the people this petition is for the benefit of the slum dwellers who could not approach this honorable court, or who could not approach honorable court at their own instance because of their social and financial restrictions, and thereby you, at the behest of that individuals, not at the behest of, but but for the benefit of that individuals, are preferring present public interest litigation. So that is what is required to be mentioned as part of a declaration. Now para 4, what does it require? A specific averment in para 4 of the writ petition for the persons, bodies, institutions likely to be affected by the order shot in the writ petition, and who shall be impleaded as a respondent. So now you see, whatever respondents here we have mentioned in the cause title as to what would be their role as far as the present public interest litigation is concerned, you are required to mention in para 4. These are certain outlines been given by the High Court in the rules framed in 2010. Now F. Now just read this. A specific averment in para 5 of the writ petition of the background of the petitioner with qualifications as far as it may be material to show the competence of the petitioners to espouse this cause. If the petitioner is an organization, the name and address of its office bearer and the nature of activities shall also be stated. An averment shall also be made that the petitioner has the means to pay the cost, if any, imposed by the court, and an undertaking to the court in that respect. Now, usually, I mean, it is presumed nowadays. That's the best problem, that is the worst problem that we are facing now. People have taken a recourse of this public interest litigation for the purpose of their personal gain, which has led to include this paragraph 5 in the writ petition. You need to, if you know, sometimes the individual or the institution, they file petition for someone else who actually fund them for purpose of filing this such type of public interest litigation. Now for an example, supposedly a nutrition manufacturing company, they are manufacturing baby nutrition foods, and in order to promote their sale, what they do is, whatever nutritional food they are preparing, the quantum of nutrition available in their food, which they are manufacturing. In order to sell that product, what they will do is they will ask someone to file a public interest litigation in the court to direct the state government to compel the parents of children to provide them a food of specific nutrition. Now that nutrition is only available in his product only, but they do not disclose that it is because of this product I am actually filing this. What they will say is that because of malnutrition, as per the study, this is the minimum requirement of nutrition which is required to be provided to the children of such and such age, and therefore please compel the state government to make rules and regulations in order and instruct the parents of the children to make available the nutrition, this level of nutrition till particular age. Now that nutrition level is only available in the country with one product, nothing else. And if court, without looking to this background or back of that thing, agrees and pass direction, then what will happen? The product of that individual will flourish. Every children will be required to eat that food, and that's how he can actually market his product. So that is for the benefit of that so-called industrialist who has funded the person to file a PIL. Now, in order to avoid such thing, a requirement is now that one must disclose his source of income and also disclose as to from where he will be funding this public interest litigation, and from that he will be paying the cost that he will be incurring in this litigation. So that disclosure is required. Now in para 6, the writ petition, details of representation made to the authorities concerned for remedial actions and replies, if any, received thereto shall be set out precisely. Now, as you all might have learned now for the purpose of writ petitions, before you file a writ petition, you need to first raise your grievance before the appropriate authority, and only if appropriate authority do not take remedial action, then only your writ petition would be maintainable. Now that is what is required to be mentioned here specifically, that I have approached the corporation for requesting them to provide the alternative accommodation to the slum dwellers, but however the municipal corporation has not replied or has denied my prayer or has rejected my application and are proceeding with the demolition. So that is required to be mentioned. Whatever representations that you have made and whatever reply that you have received is required to be mentioned. Now, what does it say further is that if a petitioner has previously filed any PIL or preferred latest patents, the details thereof is required to be set out in a tabular form. So if a individual who is so publicly spirited that he keeps on filing the PIL, and then it is required now that you are required to mention that in a tabular form as to how many PILs that an individual has filed and what are the outcomes of that. Now, sometimes, court might feel that out of 10 PIL, one is frivolous PIL, and court may impose cost on that individual. Then it is also required to be mentioned in this tabular chart if any cost has been imposed or if it has been dismissed as frivolous, whatever the outcome is, that is also required to be mentioned. Now, last, the pleadings in brief divided into paragraphs setting forth the cause which has given rise to filing of the writ petition shall be pleaded, followed by the grants in support of the prayer. So that's what we have discussed already in the beginning, that after you set out your facts, you need to mention the grounds for which you are seeking the relief for, and then it has to be accompanied by the affidavit. The format of an affidavit is available on the each and every High Court's website as to what would be the nature of the affidavit required, and that is how an affidavit of an individual filing a PIL is to be filed. Now just see this. This is the form of a public interest litigation for Delhi High Court. Now, just see this. It says that in the Honorable High Court of Judicature at such and such court, whatever high court it is, then you need to mention public interest litigation number, whatever PIL number is. Then whatever article under which you are preferring, it would be 21, 19, 21, 14, or any other article, 15, or any other article under which you are filing the public interest litigation. And then you need to mention as to what are the representations that you are made and what are the letters that you have written and what order you are challenging. So after this, the nature of the litigation that you have highlighted at the top, then you will be coming down to the parties. So parties would be, you just see this, the parties would be, you need to mention name of the petitioners, whoever or whosoever the petitioner is, and there may be multiple petitioners in the PIL. There is no problem with that. So any number of petitioners who are filing the PIL, and then the respondents. The respondents could be the Union of India if it is concerned with the union government. It could be the state government for the ministries concerned with the state government. It could be an individual authorities like collector or urban development authorities or corporations, etc., under the PIL against whom the petition is preferred. Now just see this. You will be narrating the facts here. So first would be the facts, but as now we just follow our rules when you narrate these facts. Your rules are, sorry, I think I have, your rules are that you will be first mention gist, then facts, then grounds, then declarations as required under the required laws or the forms or the instructions of the high courts or the Supreme Court, whatever the case may be. And then you will be finally praying the relief that you are claiming under the writ petition, and then will be followed by the format of the affidavit. So this is one of the form of the writ petition which I could find for you people. So that is how, more or less the PIL could be prepared and drafted. I think that is more than sufficient. I have taken more time than what has been allotted to me. I am sorry for that, for holding you people too long in explaining myself. But I think you could understand the manner in which a PIL could be drafted in whatever way I could be able to explain you. Thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot, sir, for all this detailed explanation of PIL drafting and even all the nuances of drafting, that what para should be mentioned and what not should be mentioned, what is the chronology of mentioning everything. So first of all, I would like to thank you for this informative session. And I would also ask students, if you have any doubt from what sir has said, if you have any query, if you want to ask a question, so you can raise your hand. I will unmute you and you can ask your question if there is any doubt.
So shall I stop sharing first? Just give me a minute. Huh?
Yes, sir, certainly.
I can see you. Yes.
So I believe that all students would have got a comprehensive idea of PIL after 2 days of session, one on theoretical session and one very wonderful discussion about the drafting of the PIL. And sir also talked about facts. Also, he also talked about imaginary facts, so that it become more easy for us to understand the philosophy of PIL. So I would like to thank Purvish Malkan sir for giving his important time, and it was very informative session, sir, for all of the students. Around 80 students were there, and I thank all the students also for being patient and listening to sir. So I would like to end today's session on a higher note. Thank you, sir, for all your time and giving us this information, sir. Also, sir, I would request if we can share this PPT with the students, because it would be beneficial.
I will share with you, definitely.
Thanks a lot. So thank you for giving your time, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.